representing the Richmond branch of Friends of Congo, which is a recently formed organization that came about because Pastor Hunter invited a representative from the National Office of Friends of Congo to come speak right here in this hall, and they formed an organization as a result of that. So, welcome home.
Please forgive me if I stand because I have a weak voice, and for me to get the sound out, I have to stand up because I'm bent. It won't come out unless I straighten up. Actually, we formed this organization as a result a couple of months ago, I guess, of the meeting, and the organization we formed is the Pan-African Unity Movement. So although it was the Friends of the Congo that came here, we formed something called the Pan-African Unity Movement, and I'd like all the members of that movement to stand up, Pan-African Unity Movement, stand up, and you can see them, and if you have questions about what we're doing and whatnot, you can talk with them, and these are people from all different organizations and so forth. Now just a little bit about what we mean by Pan-Africanism. I just want to say just a history of it. It's the oldest political movement among Africans in the United States. When I say Africans, I'm talking about black folks. We didn't ask to come here. We didn't ask to be American citizens. Many of us still understand ourselves to be African. And as Malcolm X said, just because a cat has kittens in the oven, you don't call them biscuits. And because we were born in this oven or this belly of the beast, we don't want to be just this belly of the beast. It's also the oldest political movement. It's one of the biggest contributions of people on this side to a larger struggle into politics and to human liberation in general. And I'll just give you a couple examples. One of the first of these guys was a guy by the name of Paul Cuffey. Paul Cuffey was the first African to sue for the right to vote in court. He was a free African during slavery time. He also, along with his brother, built a boat, built a boat by his hands, and took 38 black folks home to Africa. And those folks still have their families back and forth between what we call Sierra Leone today and Tidewater, in the Tidewater area of Virginia. Nat Turner. We talk about the Reverend talked about William Lloyd Garrison, but there wouldn't have been a William Lloyd Garrison if there had been Nat Turner. When Nat Turner did his thing in Southampton County, just a little bit down the road here, it inspired William Lloyd Garrison to begin to take up his movement, although it was a nonviolent movement. Nat Turner also inspired John Brown. So this Nat Turner movement is a movement we really don't talk about. Because he did what is unspeakable for an African in this country, that's to rise up in arms, in rebellion. Gabriel, here in this area, why do I call Gabriel a Pan-Africanist? In some ways, it's kind of our own bias, in which we look often as Gabriel as really only the central leader. In order to make this thing happen, all of the leaders of the different African spiritual groups had to be brought into the thing. So if you were from a particular language group or your particular religious group, what we call African traditional religion, you brought your folks in. So this rebellion that we had in this area, not only was it inspired by some of the stuff that's going on in Haiti, but also when it was organized, as many of the other rebellions were, they were organized on an ethnic African basis, and people were brought in based on their traditional leadership from back home. So it should be seen not just as a local movement, but as a Pan-African movement when we talk about this guy Gabriel. Now, before I talk about the Congo, people say, why are you going to talk about something happening over there when things are happening bad to us here? And when the Reverend spoke upstairs, I really enjoyed his speech. I've been looking forward to hearing him. He mentioned all of the stuff that we won in the first Reconstruction and the second Reconstruction. But one of the things we always have to be aware of is something they call war democracy. And that is this system here, we call a certain type of capitalism, slave-based capitalism. In terms of this system, it always offers some crumbs at the time when it's making this big kind of forays around the world. So it offered some things during the war on Vietnam. Some people said, shut up and get your crumbs and things, get in the system. And the Black Power movement said, hell no, we won't go. And it was the Black Power movement that helped to inspire King to take the stand that he took.
That's right.
So we were saying the Pan-African movement is a movement that's always said we will not be confined to our plantation. And the plantation is north and south. What Malcolm called, we got down south and we got up south. And Harriet Tubman said, hey, I'm going all the way to Canada. And if she knew what was going on in Canada, she said, well, I ain't even gonna stop there. So anyway, so when we talk about this thing of Pan-Africanism, we're talking about it's an old history, and it's a liberationist history. Now, in terms of the Congo is extremely important because 1884, 1885, Europeans around the world came together to jointly to jointly oppress and to carve up Africa. They were convened by King Leopold of Belgium, who had made Congo his personal fief. The second largest country in Africa, he owned almost as an individual. And in this place, women were held hostage. They would take a woman, and they said, if you don't go out and get us so much rubber, we're going to rape your wife, we're going to take your children. And if you didn't have a wife, if you didn't work hard, they cut off a hand, cut off a foot. And this was civilization brought to us by European, our betters. So Europeans came together at the behest of this guy, and they jointly carved up Africa. Now, we have to understand something about the colonization of Africa. The U.S. is not the last in the colonizers. Colonization of Africans here preceded the colonization of Africans on the continent. And many of the tricks that they use on our brothers and sisters back home, they learned by experimenting on us here. And in fact, one of the reasons that Europeans had to go in and colonize Africa in the first place was because they believed that the cotton production in the South, they didn't know what was going to happen. So the first movement directly into Africa, direct production in Africa, was for cotton, because they didn't know what was going to happen with the cotton markets here. And when we talk about cotton, and when we talk about capitalism, there's a philosopher who once said, this guy said, look, without cheap textiles, you don't have industrial revolution. Without cheap cotton, you don't have cheap textiles. Without slavery, you don't have cheap cotton. Without slavery, you don't have civilization in Europe. So when we talk about capitalism, we critique capitalism, we have to understand that slavery was built on the backs of the exploitation of enslaved Africans, and on the theft of Native American land. Those two struggles are intertwined and cannot be unlinked. So, let's look at the Congo. 1884, 1885, you bring these folks in, and you divide up the continent. At the center of this method is what's going on in the Congo itself. Central African Republic is now just blown up. And when the French went into Central African Republic, they based their methods there based on what the Belgians were doing in the Congo. So the Congo is the center of Africa. It can supply hydroelectric power to all of Africa. All of Africa. It has diamonds and all that stuff galore, but the people themselves sometimes don't eat once every 2 days, once every 3 days among the poorest, that is most exploited people anywhere in the place of the earth. Over 8 million people have died in the past 15, 20 years. Throughout Africa, something like 30, 40 million people have died in this war that has been going on for the last 30, 40 years. About 50 years ago, a young man who came in to try to make things right, who said to black folks here, hey, don't worry about it, because if they give you grief in the U.S., all of y'all can come live in the Congo. This guy was named by Patrice Lumumba. We used to study Patrice Lumumba in my little segregated school out in the country. We used to study Patrice Lumumba. We used to talk about him in the playgrounds and study him in the classroom. We used to study all these people in the classroom itself. We used to, and our teachers in the classroom told us, and I just want to give you all a different idea of what was going on, what they call segregation. Our teachers told us, don't get mad when they were trying to make us mad in 1958, 59 against Castro. Don't get mad at Castro. He's not the one to give you these leftover books and have you use those toilets outside. It's somebody, look at somebody around here. So we had a liberationist teaching oftentimes going on in some of those schools. Now, so here in the Congo, 50 years ago, they had to get rid of this guy. And not only did they kill him, but they threw him in a vat of acid so that people would never use his graveyard as a rallying point. But yet today, the youth in the Congo are calling out his name louder than ever. So, and there's one other point I want to make. It shows the unity of this thing. There's a group, there's an organization, there's a, what do you call it, a Wall Street organization called Black Rock. Black Rock, you know, during what they call the Great Recession, Depression, millions of people lost their homes, right? 1 million families lost their homes. Black Rock is the biggest company now going around buying up these foreclosed homes. They're going to rent them back out to the people who used to own them for these stolen, bad mortgages and stuff. Black Rock is also one of the leading people stealing land in Africa. And the chairman of Black Rock, his last name, appropriately enough, is Fink, introduced Barack Obama to Wall Street and gave Barack Obama his first big piece of money. So when we look at this thing, it's not a surprise what's going on with Africom, right? One of the big boys at Harvard, Samuel P. Huntington, wrote a piece called Discriminant Deterrence. I just throw this in because what Anna was saying, she popped this thing in my head. And discriminant deterrence said, look, how we control the world. You know, the key is for us to control the world. That is the United States. I'm not in it. You know, we had a song called Tonto. This is a song called Long Ranger and Tonto. And Long Ranger and Tonto got surrounded, all these Native Americans, and Long Ranger said, well, we got to do something. And Tonto turned around and said, what do you mean we, white man? So I don't get into that we American stuff, but in this thing, he said, in order to control the so-called third world, we have to control their state apparatuses. So all of these things that look kind of weird, why the United States goes in to knock off Gaddafi when they know Al-Qaeda is going to take over? Because that's going to allow them the ability now to go in and try to control the state apparatuses in all these countries. Right. This is that's possibly what's going on. So we want to, in Virginia, the home of Gabriel, the home of Mingo, where I'm from, we had a guy there, he don't get in the history books, Mingo, and some of these other folks, we want to begin, or we want to carry on this work of first organizing, spotlighting some of the injustices. So we're asking we're going to start off, we're not starting off big, we're starting off small. We just have a few things we want people to think about signing. We have these cards. And we send these to the State Department saying, we want you to stop supporting those countries that are your allies that are destabilizing in the Congo, destabilizing Congo. That's the one thing. Two, we want to get your names and addresses and so forth, because we're going to have some events coming up in February. And at the event in February, you'll actually be able to talk to some young people from the Congo itself and other parts of Africa, and who are actually doing, and also talk to some people who are doing organizing on the ground. So these are things we want to do, and we hope to have you all be involved with us in these things.